Welcome to the CD Fitness Podcast, where our mission is to change the way women see themselves in order to show up optimally in all aspects of their life. We aim to improve knowledge, self-love, and the embodiment of the unique self on this earth. We prioritize health and nutrition education as well as coaching to empower women to make healthier decisions to live longer, achieve freedom from diet culture, and create a lifestyle that they truly want to live while supporting one another as a collective whole of badass women. I am your host, Cheryl D. Guzman, and also the founder of CD Fitness, Conscious Diligent Fitness. Welcome back, guys. On today's show, we have a special guest. She is in the Black Dress Project, and her name is Melanie. So welcome to the show, Melanie.
Hey, Cheryl. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad to have you here. So I knew of Melanie for a while through my boyfriend, actually. And Melanie and Jamie both grew up in the same church youth group over the years growing up. And we didn't really get to know each other and meet until about this year. And I'm really glad that we did. This year has been quite a ride. There's a lot been going on in the world over the last few months, of course. It's been an eye-opening year. But before we get into all of that, let's talk about your earlier years. Since you're our guest today, you've hit a pretty sweet benchmark in your life lately at the start of this year. So as I mentioned previously to our listeners, you grew up with your faith being a part of your life. How else would you describe your upbringing, especially in the diverse town of the Chicago suburbs?
This year's been crazy. I would say I started going to church when I was probably in second grade, just old enough to understand things. Like I said, I did grow up in the suburbs of Des Plaines, so my life growing up, maybe until the end of high school, was church twice a week, school, and then home. That was basically it. Didn't really do much more than that for a long time. So I grew up in Asian family, so a lot of expectations for that was you get good grades, you do well, you come home, you do your chores, and that's about it. I didn't really know much more than that. That was just my life.
Can
And
you, I'm going to jump in really quickly because I think this is a really interesting ethnic background that you have. Can you go into the backgrounds of your parents and what countries they immigrated from?
absolutely. So my mom is Cambodian. She was a refugee from Cambodia in the 80s, and my dad is from India, and he came around in his teen years to the US. So both my parents are immigrants. Um, they met in their teens, or I mean, sorry, not like 18, 20, around that age. And it was very interesting because my mom is Buddhist, my dad is Catholic, but I went to
Mm.
a Christian church with my aunt. So we had a lot of different things going on growing up. I went to Catholic church for Easter and New Year's and stuff like that. Went to the Buddhist temple with my grandpa and my mom to pay respects to Buddha. So I was kind of all over the world at that age.
That's kind of cool. Was it ever um, conflicting or confusing for you at all, being able to go back and forth between the church and the temple?
At that age, I just thought I didn't know better. I just thought that's how life was. Like I thought everyone went to church, and for me, it was just like I need to go where my parents need me to go because it's expected of me. My
Hmm.
parents want me to go here, so I need to go here and I need to be respectful, which means like not sleeping during service and paying attention. And even if I didn't understand
The
the
Catholic
language,
service.
exactly, yeah, instead of sleeping on the pew, like I need to pay attention to what the pastor or the priest is saying. Um, so for me, it was just my life. I didn't know if it was wrong or right or the right thing to do. I did it because it felt right. I was honoring my parents. Um, so I just went with it.
Wow, that is really interesting. So you mentioned how your mother was a refugee from Cambodia. When in your life did you find out about this and her story?
I didn't really know about it until I mean, I knew about it as a kid, but I didn't really understand it until I was a little bit older, maybe
Mm.
high school age. And that's just from talking with my family, or instead of we walked 6 miles, it was like we walked 600 miles for freedom type of
Wow.
thing, between their journey in Cambodia to Vietnam. And I might butcher all the facts, but I just know that they ate bugs, they walked on the road barefoot, and all to get away from oppression and the people that are running their government, which is crazy to think because I've never I can't even imagine feeling something like how they felt. And my mom's
Absolutely.
side is 13 people, 13 siblings and the parents, so
Wow.
big family.
Oh, wow. Are all of the siblings also in America at this point?
Yeah, one has passed away, but all of them made it to the US, which you don't really hear of that. Um, and some of them were married and their spouses made it too, so it's just very crazy story.
That's amazing. And to be able to hear that as a teenager growing up, you're aware of that struggle and it brings to light some of the things that you have within your life and our lives here as what we would consider a first generation American in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, that's super cool. And then, so your dad came here in his teen years, and his story a little bit different?
He was sponsored. My great aunt was a nurse, a traveling nurse in the US, and she had sponsored my dad's family, which is him, his brothers, three sisters, my grandma and grandpa. And they came over here and started school and just started working from a very young age and just doing whatever they could to make ends meet.
So more of that working middle class story, and kind of got them and your mom to where you're at currently. Does that
Correct.
sound about right? Yeah, that's
Thank you.
actually pretty similar to my family as well, like except almost flipped in a way. I mean, neither of my parents were refugees, but my mom came over with a couple of her siblings and her parents, and then they also went to school. She graduated nursing school and then started working. Like that was just her life, and her being the oldest, she had looked after all of her younger siblings kind of as like a second mother because her parents were always working, and so they started their life here in Chicago, which is cool. I was like running within my neighborhood because we just moved, and I passed by my grandparents' old house, so it was cool to like see where they started. And same thing, they were in that working middle class. Well, at that time it definitely wasn't middle class, it was working lower middle class,
Yeah,
making ends meet like you
absolutely.
said. And then on my dad's side, they also have a big family as well, but he grew up in a lot more of the urban, impoverished areas of Makati and Manila, the Philippines. So it was a city life for him, but on the other hand, they weren't able to come over as quickly to the United States to get the education and to start working in the middle class. So they were working, as kids, and just trying to make pennies and dimes or pesos in that country, selling flowers and skipping school so that they can help make money for their family. And it was a very different life that he had lived. But eventually his parents came over, and then their youngest three siblings were able, three or four, were able to come to the United States and start just right into the workforce. There really was no education going on for my dad's side, and it was just a different life. And then they met here, so my mom and my dad worked their way into the American middle class, and so that's where we were kind of brought into the picture as the first generation Americans. But it's really just so interesting to me to learn about my friends and their parents' stories and their grandparents' stories, because it's so different from ours.
It's wild. I mean, my grandpa was an English teacher back in Cambodia, or just a teacher in general. He taught English, and some other subjects. But when he came here, he was a janitor for his whole life. He worked at a school and he was a janitor for 30 plus years until he retired. So it's
Wow.
just wild to think like the difference in culture and knowledge, English sufficient. Like he learned English from working here, or better
Mm-hmm.
English, I should say. But it's just wild to think their journey and where they are than where I am now, or the privileges I've been given, being first generation. So I'm really thankful.
Definitely. And it just brings to light so much of what we can be grateful for when we were just talking about like bad technology days and like
Yeah,
things that are bringing us our daily struggles and such. But yeah, definitely grateful. So we also, I know both you and I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, in which were pretty diverse. Unlike a lot of the Chicago suburbs where there are majority of white children in schools and white families in schools, the further out you go from the city. But we were probably like 15 to 20 minutes away from the city of Chicago. And so our friend groups were pretty diverse. Would you say yours were?
I would agree. I had friends I was the person that was friends with everyone. So I didn't care who you were, where you're from, as long as you were nice to me and we got along, like you were my friend. And I kind of kept that throughout high school. Like I was just friends with anyone and everyone. I didn't really care who you were.
Yeah, same. It like when I was younger, it really didn't even occur to me. Um, you know, I didn't know anything about race, ethnicity, nationality. I like there were neighbors of mine that were of all different backgrounds, and I had best friends that were white. I had best friends that were Filipino. I had best friends that were just all different backgrounds, and it didn't process for me that there were differences in race or ethnicity until I went to school, I guess.
Hmm.
And that was really my first encounter of realizing that I was maybe a little bit different from other people in the way that I looked or in the way that my family spoke a language, because I grew up learning Tagalog and English at the same time. And I thought that was normal. I was like, oh, okay, so I guess I'm only speaking one of the languages now. And then when I would tell people at school, I remember like later in first and second grade, like my earliest memories of actually encountering curiosity from my classmates about my ethnicity. They would ask me if I was Chinese and if the language that I spoke at home was Chinese. And I was really confused because I didn't think that that was the language. But since everyone seemed so sure about it, I was like, it might be.
Yeah.
So it was just, it, now I feel like kids are growing up and seeing and experiencing the divides or the differences in what they look like or how they're growing up or what their households are like among their friends and their peers earlier on.
Yeah. I mean, it's sad to say now, but when I was in my elementary school, is like when I first had that realization that you did. Everyone thought they didn't really know what Cambodian or Indian was because I didn't look like either one. I just looked like a mix.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people thought I was Mexican or Hispanic or that I was Hawaiian. They wondered why I didn't speak Spanish and like what language did I speak at home and why did I look or dress a certain way. It was very, very interesting. Um, that people they were like, "Oh, you're not Asian. You don't look like one."
Mm-hmm.
So it was really hard, and I was always really embarrassed to say like, "Oh, I'm Cambodian and Indian." So for a while, I told people I was Cambodian because it was just easier to say like, "Oh, it's in Asia." Because if I
Mm-hmm.
told them I was Indian, it was like, "Oh, look at the little Indian." And now
Huh.
that I think about it, like I used to laugh it off, but now I think about it, like I feel really bad that I felt that way.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I'm sure you felt like not that kids or groups necessarily isolated themselves because of their ethnic background in schools necessarily, but it seemed like there was always a label or identity. And I remember this even through our teenage years. It was like the Filipino kids always made it known that you're Filipino, and like that just automatically brought you together. But I'm sure it made you feel a little out of place just because of that ethnic identity that you had, which I'm sure at this point in your life is something you're very proud of and has shaped you in so many ways, and has allowed you to really be open and like just learn more about yourself. But yeah, I think that's really tough as a child, just figuring out how that fits in and how that allows you to pick your friends and know yourself even and how you fit in with everyone.
Absolutely. I think my self-esteem suffered for a very long time, which led to, a whole slew of other issues. But as an adult, like I'm proud who I am and I'm proud of my background and how I grew up and my family and everything that I experienced through church and my friends and everything that I've learned. I'm just thankful that, yeah, it was a hard couple year, part of my life, but I definitely learned and grew a lot from it.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. I'm honestly like, I know we always knew of each other, but we really connected over the last half year. And it's so cool just knowing more about you and learning more about your story and your upbringing. And now, of course, obviously working together in the Black Dress Project, it's really about your health and fitness journey. So I am so glad that we're friends now. Like I
Me
need
too.
more people like you in my life all the time. And yeah, I want to jump into a little bit more about what you mentioned of your challenges with self-esteem or self-image, because this is something that I know I've faced, and I've talked about it on previous podcasts with several other women. I've shared about this on my social media. I've shared about it in the Black Dress Project. So how were you experiencing that? I know we've talked about your ethnic identity, and in other areas.
So, growing up in an Asian family, the first thing that almost anyone says to you that's not your mom or your dad is like, "Wow, Mel, you gained weight," or "Wow, Mel, you lost weight." It was
Oh my
always a
gosh,
it was
so true.
the first comment was always about my weight, and then it was like, "Well, how's school? Where are you going to college? How's this? How's
It was
work?"
like a business meeting every time. No, first it was like a doctor's appointment where they
Correct.
evaluate your weight, and then it was like a business meeting where they ask you, or an interview, and they ask you a whole slew of questions.
Correct. Yes, that was every growing up like that's what I knew and I thought was okay. Um, so for a while I always and because of that I was always like, "Oh, you look a little chunky today," or "You look like you gained some weight." And this is a comparison to like my mom and my sister who were both around 100 pounds most of their life. I was probably like maybe 20 pounds heavier than them most of my life. Even though I was still pretty petite, I had this vision in my head that I was this like chubby girl and like that's all I'm ever gonna be. But I'm smart, so it's okay that I'm chubby. But that's kind of how like I lived my life up until I was in college. Like just do my homework, do what my parents say. If I'm chubby, it's fine because I got everything else going for me.
So this was something, your body image and the way that you saw yourself in the mirror or even in your head was something that you were aware of but didn't necessarily bring to the surface or address per se.
Correct. Because I figure like this is how I was born. I eat what I need to eat because my parents make it or whatever I want to buy, I guess at the store or go out to eat. But I just felt like this is my life and I really didn't have control. I just kind of went with whatever my body like I would look at myself and it's like, "Oh, I need to lose weight," but this is my body, so I'm just gonna deal with it because that's what everyone thinks of me.
Interesting. So you're influenced by the external forces as far as the way that you saw yourself. And then you mentioned that until about college was when you started thinking about more of how you can maybe take control or change or impact your health and your fitness. Is that right?
Absolutely. So when I graduated college, I had worked at Dick's Sporting Goods throughout college and from 18 to like early 20s. And during that time frame, like all I did was, what college kids do. I partied, I went to school, ate late nights, go to Burger King, Taco Bell, and it was just like an overload. About my junior, senior year of college, I realized that I was destroying my body because I'd gained a bunch of weight, probably more than the freshman 15.
Mm.
Um, and I felt really bad. So around 2010, 2011, I gave up fast food because of the way it made me feel. And that was
Mm.
like my first step towards like getting better. So I didn't eat McDonald's or Burger King, which was really hard because my dad worked at McDonald's for about 20 years. So I was just
Wow.
so used to having it available to me. Um, and then I just cut everything out. So just eating at home or eating healthier versions of fast food, like maybe Chipotle or, some stuff like that, where I can
Mm-hmm.
kind of control what I'm getting. And then, so after I left Exporting Goods, I got a job at Fifth Third Bank. I was a teller, and I was just really motivated to do well and like make something of myself because my parents had worked so hard. I was like, what's my turn to like make something of
Mm-hmm.
me and be something? So I worked really hard, and within like a year and a half, I got promoted to like a personal banker, which was huge back then. Like no one starts as a teller and moves up that fast.
That's
But I was
awesome.
I was really driven to like be better and get to the pay that I thought I deserved and stuff like that. And that's when I set foot into the Schaumburg branch of Fifth Third. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I met all my really good friends that I'm friends with now, or like coworkers, but we would make lunch for each other. We would bring, like, someone would bring veggies, someone would bring salad, someone would bring a meat or a protein. And I didn't really know portion control, but I knew, like, oh, I'm eating a bunch of vegetables and I feel great. Um, so we would all like collaborate on lunch, and like a snack there, almonds, peanut butter, stuff like that. And then after work, about 3 to 4 days a week, we would go to this small gym called Blast Fitness, and we would
Mm.
take like this boot camp class. And that was like my first experience into like actually working out. And then that catapulted me into trying like 21 day fix with Beachbody and I ran my first 5K in my early 20s. And at that point I was like, "Oh, this is great. Like I'm going to keep doing this and I'm going to be the best fitness person ever and get the body I always thought I wanted."
Mm.
Um but it was always met with like the minute someone wasn't accountable or wasn't doing it with me, because my self-esteem, I was too scared to go by myself. So if I didn't
Mm.
have a friend going with me to the gym or going or bringing lunch, then I just kind of went back to my old ways of just being to myself and back to my old lifestyle. It was kind of like a yo-yo type thing.
For sure. I know many women, and I'm sure men too, can relate, but this is highly an experience that I've encountered with many women in the Black Dress Project and people who are just wondering how they can break this cycle because all of their life they've been struggling with their self-image or even their self-esteem and not realizing that they have the ability to look into their resources and also learn how to do it for themselves. And it sounded like maybe at that time you just might not have been ready. And I talk about this in some of the workshops that I do for my challenges. But one of the reasons why people tend to go backwards or tend to not make progress long term is because they just fail to shift that identity about themselves and they don't see themselves as that brand new person. So you started to say that you were going to be fit, but it might have only been when you were around people and when you were around the support of other people, which is also really important. Your environment is huge in being successful in anything, right? Like your career, education, your relationship, but of course within your health and your fitness. And so it can feel really lonely when you don't have those people around you, or it can feel really confusing because you're going to try so many different things and you're going to dabble into this type of exercise or this type of diet before you just get a little discouraged and go back to your old ways and kind of numb yourself, whether it's like with food or with like being too busy to do your workouts or just like binge watching TV or something. So yeah, I think it was just a timing thing for you, and that sort of changed over time. I mean, between that time and when we started working together, you also had a few other different fitness endeavors. I know that you were certified to be a yoga teacher. So, how did you get into that area of working on your physical activity and your self esteem or self practice through yoga?
So, um, it's kind of a wild story, but when I was going through those years at the bank and I had left and gone to Oracle, I was in a relationship, I was married. And in 2017, we separated. It was very abrupt. I won't get into the long story of it, but I was kind of left just with myself. I had no one left anymore. Or at that time, that's what I thought. I had
Mm-hmm.
moved back home with my parents, and I just felt very low, and I didn't know what to do. And all of my friends were like, "You should start exercising again. You'll feel much better." And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Yeah, yeah. Like I've done this before. Like I exercise and then I stop. I exercise and then I stop." But what my friends and all in 2017, my friends were all starting to try yoga. There was a core power nearby us, and they kept telling me like, "Go try a class, go try a class." And I was like, "Okay, fine." Um, and instead of just trying a class, I took it to the extreme. I actually went to the location in Sauganash, and I signed up to be a one of the cleaning people so that I could get
Mm-hmm.
free yoga because I didn't want to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I started cleaning the
Smart.
studio once or twice a week, and that paid for me to go to yoga for free, which the memberships are pretty expensive for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I had taken like maybe 2 or 3 classes, and I said, and one of the teachers had recommended teacher training, and I was like, you know what, I'm doing it. So, because at that point I didn't really know, I didn't really have much going on, so I was like, I have all the time, like let me sign up for teacher training, and I was
Mm-hmm.
just very intrigued. And the more research I did, like the roots of yoga started back in India and Asia, and it really helped me connect to myself and my culture because it started where I'm from, basically, and
Mm-hmm.
just like the Sanskrit, learning Sanskrit and understanding like meditation and the things that all came along with yoga. It just like transformed my life. So that year that I became yoga certified, I traveled a bunch. I went all over the US by myself, just solo trips, and it really just taught me that I'm all I need in my life to be successful as long as I believe it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's, I would say 2017 to 2018 is like when my life really started to change um, for the better. Um, so and then 2018, I met my current boyfriend that I'm with, um, and it was just really empowering to be able to share like my journey and like what I've learned with him and like my
Mm-hmm.
family members. So I really started, I would go through spurts of like yoga and eating well, but I never really knew how to tie it together. And once I had graduated yoga training, I had pushed myself so far or so hard that I didn't realize that I was exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
So after I had finished my 200 hours of training, I interviewed to be a teacher, and I ended up not getting it. And a lot of it was because it went back to my insecurity that I wasn't ready to teach or I wasn't good enough to teach.
Yes, your own
Um,
belief about
yeah,
yourself. And that really drives probably, and you didn't realize it probably in the moment, but your own belief about yourself drives the way that you're going to speak, the way that you're going to show up to that interview, the way you're going to answer questions, the energy that you carry. And if you were exhausted and burnt out and you didn't think that you were ready, you probably weren't bringing your 100% to that interview.
yeah, absolutely. And my teachers were
Wow.
shocked because some of them were the ones that I had trained with, and they were like, "What happened? Like, what's going on?" And I was like, "I'm just not ready. I'm tired, and I don't think I can do it." And they're like, "You have the potential, but you're just not there yet. So just take some time to practice yourself and come back when you're ready." And I
Mm-hmm.
never actually interviewed again just because I didn't think it was the right time. But luckily, like I've been able to still keep up my practice on my own, and I
Mm-hmm.
have taught for like a couple friends and family, and it's been really empowering. So hopefully in the future I can get back into that. But it was just I had such a strong, powerful time, and I just got let it go because of I didn't think I was good enough. And then after that scenario, like the last 2 years, I kind of went through phases where I would eat really well or I'd work out. Or I eat really well or work out, but I never did it together up
Hmm.
until this year in January when I did the 5 day challenge with you, is when I really brought them both together.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like way before we even got in contact and worked together in the 5 day challenge, you were already mindful of how to eat healthy and how to take on exercise. But what was different about this nutritional protocol that changed your viewpoints or your mindset about food for yourself?
With the challenge.
Yeah.
It actually gave me numbers and things that I could look at and quantify. because I grew up like as a student most of my life.
Mm.
Like numbers and seeing things on paper is like what I needed to fully understand. Like I said before, like I had eaten healthy or I had gone to the gym, but I didn't understand like the numbers or like what I needed to eat to fuel my body. I was just eating before to eat because I was hungry. But
Mm-hmm.
I was eating maybe like 1 to 2 meals and then like a bunch of snacks and sweets. With this 5 day challenge, I was able to see like, oh, well, I need to get some protein, some carbs, some fats, a little bit of everything, and I need to eat a way lot more than I was eating before. I
Yeah. Oh my
probably
gosh.
started double
You're
eating what I used to eat.
I know, and it's just so funny. I mean, it's not funny. It's like so. It brings me joy to see how much you have grown and progressed over just even the last 5 to 6 months. So after the 5 day challenge, of course, that was just the kickoff to the start of this roller coaster of a year for you and me and for everybody. But after the graduation workshop, we got on our call and talked about this long history of yours with fitness and with dieting. And it sounded like you were ready to join in and take it a step further to be one of my one on one clients. And I invited you in. So we chose to commit to each other at that time. It was kind of like a little relationship commitment. That's how I see like taking on every new client, because I really like to work with the best of the best who are ready and want to make a change. So, was this a scary commitment for you at the time?
Oh, for sure. And I thought I made the biggest mistake. So I
Mm.
think after the 5 day challenge, it was my birthday. My birthday was January 11th. I turned 30, and I was in Vegas and I got really sick in Vegas. Um, so I had rescheduled my graduation or like my follow up with you a little bit after I
Mm-hmm.
came back from Vegas. But when I was there, I realized like I'm not happy with my body and how I feel. And I'm 30, like I shouldn't feel like I'm dying when I get sick, or
Mm.
I shouldn't feel like this pain or like aches going up and down stairs. So when I came back, like I was really scared to commit to the Black Dress Project, but I knew that with I have a niece and a nephew, and I knew that one day like I want to have my own kids, and I don't want to feel like this ever again. So I was super scared because I didn't really know if I had what it took to be one of your clients, but I said if Cheryl accepts me or like thinks I can do it, then I'm gonna try. And that's kind of how
Yes.
it all worked out.
Yes, I love that you identified your motivations. And that's like one of the first questions I ask when we get on that call, right? Like, what's your main motivation? Why are you here? What do you want to accomplish? And we get right to the truth. And you shared exactly that with me. You said it almost verbatim. So I know your purpose is real. Like, you're looking not only just for yourself and not feeling like an older woman in a 30-year-old body, but also for your niece and your nephew, your family, I realize is very important to you. Your future and goal oriented. You want to have a family of your own. And so these are the bigger picture whys that drive the clients that I have to really succeed, not just in the first 90 days, but in the year long that we get to work together and beyond that. So that buyer's remorse is so real. And the reason is, so buyer's remorse is like, when you commit and then you're like, I'm signed up. And then you're like, oh, yeah, all right, we hang up the phone and you're like, oh, shoot. You just have that like sinking feeling in your stomach because you think that you're not good enough, or maybe you're not going to succeed, or maybe you will succeed and you don't know how that's going to feel. And that's so real. And that's because you care so much and that you are actually ready for something bigger than you might have expected. And timing is everything. When you went into your fitness journey with your coworkers in your early 20s and you did your yoga certification, like those were all little steps to getting you to being fully ready for a huge change. And so your motivations are clear. You have a very strong will, and willpower only takes you so far. So when your willpower runs out, you have to kind of backtrack on your purpose and why you're doing things so that you can get through those shitty days that are just so hard sometimes. And I know that in the past couple of months, like it hasn't been the easiest ride. There's been times where you've gotten sick as well, or you've just had a hard few days or weeks and we've transitioned, but the overall progress that you've made has been huge. So I want to ask you, how do you feel like you have shifted your identity about yourself since the start of this year, since that moment when you came back from Vegas and said, I don't want to feel this way, like I don't want to move on this way? How have you changed?
Well, it's really ironic that you talk about buyer's remorse because when you did ask me like what my goals were, you were like, "Well, what do you want to do? Like, do you want to lose a dress size? Do you want to do this?" I'm like, "I want to fit into a medium shirt." The most generic thing I could possibly say is what I told you I wanted. I can fit into a medium shirt. I want to feel light. I want to feel airy. And it's like,
Yes.
Melanie, could you make up any more generic goals? But you just let me go with it. You let me take those goals and like run with it. And
Mm-hmm.
the ironic thing is, yes, I fit into a medium great now, and I feel light
Yeah,
and
you look
airy.
awesome.
But as we work together, I've really noticed that my mindset, my confidence, and just everything about life has changed a lot. Before I was just so, I gave you those answers because I was unsure of myself and I
Mm-hmm.
was afraid to commit to a number because I didn't want to not meet it and feel discouraged. You know, like my life is like a number game. Like if I couldn't get those numbers that I wanted, I didn't want to feel like I wasted my time or your time or disappoint yourself
Mm-hmm.
or just myself in general. Um, but as time has gone on, like I know like these numbers and these and quantitative things matter, but I'm more worried now about how I feel and like how I want to look for myself. So throughout this program, we've gone through coronavirus and the stay-at-home order, and I was going to the gym a lot, and then Corona happened, and I stopped going to the gym because I couldn't. Um,
Yeah.
so I
Oh, and
was like,
just to talk on that a little bit, I know even in the beginning you were like really nervous to go to the gym by yourself, even. So a little
yeah.
bit of that older version of yourself was still shining through in the beginning and before you started to shift.
Yeah, I think that first month was really hard. I wanted to cry every time I went to the gym. So
Mm.
January, I was like, oh my gosh, like I was afraid to even lift. Like I made up excuses because I didn't think I was able to lift. So I kind of stuck to more stuff on the mat or cardio. Um, and then when February came around, I was like, you know what? Forget it. I'm gonna go lift on Friday and see how I feel. And honestly, I love lifting more than cardio now. And it's funny because
Oh, yes.
people would look at me like, why is this girl lifting? It's a sea of men in the weight room
Oh my
at
gosh,
Lifetime.
totally.
So it was really intimidating, but I was like, you know what? I'm doing this for me, not anyone else. And uh I just went with it. And then February into March, like that's when everything started to happen. And then I was like, oh, I just started enjoying the gym again. I can't go anymore. So it kind of threw me off a little bit with I was still eating very well, but I was like, oh, I don't have the ability to work out the way I wanted to work out anymore. So it's kind of a learning curve for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But this whole time, like, I think my weight has fluctuated back to the original weight to back down. But my body from the first picture I took to now, I don't even recognize the person. I'm like, who was I before? Um, and it's just great to, even though I was not where I wanted to be back then, like I appreciate where I've come. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and just the way I feel about myself. Like before, I'd probably be like, oh my gosh, look at myself and be like the self pity, self-sabotage. But now I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, like I did the best I could for myself at that time, and now I'm doing even better.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and
I
I
mean,
appreciate that.
you're stacking your habits. Like you have to meet yourself where you start. And that's part of my job, is helping you recognize that everyone has a different starting point. We all have different prerequisites as far as what skills do we have, what knowledge do we have, what resources we have, and how we can build on that so that after the first 3 weeks or 3 months, that's when you really start to see noticeable changes, both, I mean, within your body. Like even in the first 3 weeks, your body had changed, just the way you switched out from eating all the sweets and snacks to real food. And then in 3 months, we kind of honed in on your goals a little bit more. So now that you had met your goals of feeling lighter, fitting into a medium shirt, we talked more specifically about your goals and got real. You trusted me with them, and I talked you through the process, and I said, this is going to take a while and this is going to be something that we're going to commit to. But I knew that at that point, right around the 11, 12 week mark, you were ready for that. Like you weren't ready to not disappoint yourself, and you weren't setting goals in order for to like impress me or make it work for me. Like this was really yours. Now you started to own it. And sometimes that takes a little bit of time, but now that's how I see your identity really has shifted is you thrived off of that maybe external motivation, and you've really taken it inward and are doing it solely for yourself, and this is your mission, and I'm here for it. I'm supporting you through it. And even though we don't have the gym right now, we can't lift as many weights right now, you're adapting and you're making things work for yourself, and I think that's so important because your life is going to change all the time.
Absolutely. And between work, working from home, different shifts, I think my shift changed 3 times, well, since March, um,
Mm-hmm.
or February, I would say, and working out at home. And it's just, there's always so much change, but it's been comforting to know that like I have my food that I can fuel my body with to keep going on, and I can still work out. It just depends on how I want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been nice to have like that foundation built, that even though things are really hard right now, or I mean they're getting better, but even though things are really hard, I always had that baseline to go back to restart. And it didn't feel like I lost or I failed. It just felt like, hey, like let me slow down a little bit and get back to like what I really need to do, because everything's going to be crazy all the time, right? Like that's life. But
Mm-hmm.
if I can bring myself back to a base point or a starting point and just start over again and not feel guilty about it, then it's okay. Not that I was ever derailed, but
Mm-hmm.
I have very high expectations of myself, but sometimes I gotta take a step back and know that I'm doing good and just need to do better and just start over again.
Totally. And you mentioned this earlier on with the example of your journey through becoming a yoga certified teacher, but sometimes as such a high achieving person, someone who's so driven, someone who's always had high expectations for themselves because maybe that's how you grew up or that's your personality, and you love to see success just like all of us do, but we often don't realize that that sometimes can lead to our own downfall and our own burnout, which feels almost worse than as good as our successes can feel. And it almost feels like we aren't achieving as much as we can or want to if we never understand that like the little steady progress and the journey is far more important than simply just the outcome or the success itself. So I think we're very similar in that way. And a lot of the girls in the Black Dress Project are very similar in that way as well. But what I really enjoy being able to find out about each one of you through our conversations and through our meetings and even our group calls and having the Facebook group is that this isn't only the physical body change and the physical body transformation, but there's the mindset. And we've talked a lot about it already through your whole journey, all the way from since you were a kid into a teenager up through your adult life. And you've developed this mind body connection for yourself that you're so in tune with. And I think it's amazing. It's so important. And it's what's made you such a great client to work with in CD Fitness, which one of the philosophies is to combine that conscious awareness with the diligent action. So, how would you say you've strengthened yourself as a woman through your consciousness and diligence over the last 5 to 6 months?
I would say I was always very in tune with my body in the last couple of years, I would say. Um, and I was always in tune with like my mind, but I had a hard time like putting it together. I think everything, like you said, everything I did before was like building up to where I am now. Um, so just being able to be aware of like, hey, this is a stressor, like maybe I can relax something else right now. Or hey, like this is not where I want to be, but it doesn't mean I failed. And just kind of the way I talk to myself and my mindset, self-talk is so important. And mirror work and stuff like that. And people always used to laugh at me like, why do you talk to yourself in the mirror? Or why do you repeat like mantras and like saying something like, I am beautiful, I am strong? Like, why do you say that? And it's because what you tell your body and what you tell yourself is how your body is going to respond. Like
Mm-hmm.
when the gym closed, the first thing I thought to myself was like, I'm gonna gain all my weight back. And I was like, wait, no, I'm not. I'm already doing the things in place that I need to maintain my weight and be where I want to be. So I shouldn't say that I'm gonna do this or this is gonna happen. Like that's just myself trying to self-sabotage. And
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing I've taught myself is like, yeah, sometimes you have doubt, but if you believe in yourself, as cliche as it sounds, and you tell yourself that you can do something, you can do it. And
Mm-hmm.
we're honestly like, at least for me, like I hold myself back the most when everyone else is motivating me. So it's like that conflict with myself. But I've learned that if I'm just kind to myself and gentle, that I'm gonna get to where I want to be. I just can't be so hard on it, basically.
Oh, yeah. So totally. There's this book called I'm blanking. Oh, it's called Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, and he talks all about how our subconscious and the way that we see ourselves will impact our outcomes in real life, and how we act and the surroundings that we are within, and how we react to that as well. And it is, maybe sometimes it sounds cliche, or like self-talk or affirmations seem like woo woo or whatnot, but there really is also the psychological and neurological science behind it. So we have, as humans, that makes us different from animals, are that higher level of thinking. So like our lower level thinking of our brain is always causing us to kind of like retreat or protect ourselves, or like kind of shy away from danger or failure or anything that could repeat failure in our life. So that's like that lower voice in your head saying that you're not good enough, or you're not going to be able to maintain your weight, Melanie, or you're not going to be able to fit in that medium shirt, or you know what, just go back to your old comforting ways. It's okay. Where there's also your higher level thinking brain, where you're able to think about incorporating language and also logic, reasoning, your resources and information. You're able to communicate with other people and determine this higher level of thinking to get you to a higher level. So we're always like inundated with our own thoughts, and it's great through practices like yoga, meditation, journaling, even just talking and having conversations like this, that keep us aware that we have control of how to shift our mind from that lower level of our brain and lower level of thinking to that higher level, and to continue pushing us forward as humans, because animals don't have that ability. And that's why us humans are able to do all the things that we can do, and make that mind body connection. And so it's great. I love that you're so in tune, and your positivity has shifted from what sounds like your history of being in a dark place and being maybe lonely, retreating back to talking negatively to yourself or not being kind to yourself, and just seeing and knowing who you are now is such an inspiration to me. It uplifts me. Like every time I get to chat with you, every time I get to see you, like it's amazing. And I know other people feel the same way about you. And I'm just really thankful that you're able to share your story here, because we can probably go and talk for hours for sure. But I'm excited that we have the next few, more than the next few, but really a stretch of time to be able to grow together and see you reach all of your goals, and see you be an influence, a positive influence for others around you in your circle, in your family, and anyone even who's listening to this podcast. So again, thank you for being here. A couple things I want to touch on really quickly before we start wrapping it up. But I know that not only did the gym close before the COVID-19 stay-at-home orders, you and I would have just like, friend conversations and talk about all of the ways that we could practice healing for our body, not just with our food and our exercise that we're doing every day through the Black Dress Project, but also through bodywork practices. So I know I love myself a good deep tissue massage. I got one right before the stay-at-home order. You shared with me that you would go and doing some sauna therapy. You tried acupuncture. We've done cupping. So out of all of these, what would you suggest for people to try and why?
Um, I would say my top three, I can't just pick one. My top three are massage and adjustment, acupuncture, and infrared sauna. Um, so I've been getting a massage and an adjustment with my chiropractor for maybe 5 years now, and it just changes my life. When your body is loose, it feels way different. When your body is tense and holds all the struggle and the pain and everything that you're going through, your body doesn't react the way it wants to. The blood's not free flowing. You just feel very compact and small. So by getting adjustments and massages for me, it like opens up my body and it allows me to feel more and do more and not feel so constricted like in a ball type of thing. Um, so that is one thing I recommend to everyone. If you don't want to get an adjustment, that's great. Like that's fine, but at least get a massage at least once a month
Mm-hmm.
or something, just to like get that blood flowing to break up some tissue and just let your body regenerate itself and heal itself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other thing that I have been doing for a couple years now is acupuncture as well. And every time I get acupuncture, I'm scared still, even though I've been doing it. But it feels like
The needles,
um,
those are all the needles everywhere, right?
correct, yeah. So I've done it on the front, I've done it on the back. I've tried it for stress and for tension, and I usually do it for tension now on my shoulders. I carry a lot of weight in my shoulders and a lot of
Hmm.
heaviness. And that just kind of like a story of life, right? You carry a lot of weight in your shoulders and your feet.
Oh,
But
yeah. Oh, and really quickly, I mean, we had Amy, and she was, body work specialist, and she was talking to us about the way that we carried our bodies throughout our life. And when you talked about, like, when we were growing up, we kind of just did what our parents said, went to school, did as we were told, and kind of closed off, right? Because
yeah,
that's just how we were. And you're carrying that in your shoulders. And even now, like, you're not just the way you carry yourself, but even like just being on our computers all day or like, you know, carrying that weight because that's what you have done your entire life. So it's really
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, so basically you think of yourself as hunched over. That's
Mm-hmm.
like how most of us spend our days, our times, especially as women, like we're hunched over, like very closed off and do our own thing, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
how most of us are taught to be. With acupuncture, it really just opens up my shoulders, my back. Every time I've gotten it, it's felt different, but for me, it feels like energy is flowing through my body, allowing me to rejuvenate and let new energy in. I feel like energy is very important and if for me, like I absorb people's energy very easily. So by getting
Mm-hmm.
acupuncture, I'm able to release that bad energy and just kind of like revitalize my life and like move forward. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I probably do it like every other month. I mean, I haven't done it recently because of stay at home, but order,
Mm-hmm.
but I was doing it maybe like every other month just to like give my body a chance to get that blood flowing and that energy flowing again. Um, and then the last thing that I really recommend for everyone to try is the infrared sauna. And basically, I know a lot of people have tried a sauna like the hot and the wet sauna, but infrared sauna is just light. And the first time I did it, I was like, why am I in this room? Like it just feels weird. Like I'm just sitting there in this room and I'm laying down and then eventually like I did more research on it and the infrared kind of it bounces these light bounces off your body and your muscles and it helps release tension through this like red light or not red light, whatever the color the light is. I think it's red. But anyways, after you do it more and more often, your body starts to sweat. And when you sweat, you release toxins. And this is
Mm-hmm.
all just from sitting in a room with light. And you would never think that light therapy would do anything, but I promise you, when I was at the height of my working out, I was like very tense and stressed and my body was in so much pain. I sat in this and I couldn't move my neck. And I sat in this room for 30 minutes and I felt like I could do a cartwheel after. And I can't do a cartwheel, but I wanted to do a cartwheel after this session. It
That's
was amazing.
awesome. Yeah, no, and so that light that you were talking about. So the reason why we don't sweat right away, unlike a traditional sauna, is because it's actually working at that cellular level from the inside first. So you're like detoxing right from the start of your session, and it's so cool because eventually your body is then starting to warm up and as you're detoxing from the cellular level inward, it comes outward and it's pushing it out through sweat and through your organs. So it's really, really neat. I love that visual of you doing a cartwheel. Before the end of the year, you're going to do a cartwheel.
Yeah, I think that's one of my bucket list things to do before the end of the year. I want to be able to do a cartwheel. It's because I'm scared. That's why I can't do it. I know I can do a handstand. I know I can flip over, but it's the ability to give up and not be scared to take that first hand down. So I'll get there.
Oh my, so you have done handstands, but not a cartwheel. That's so funny. Like, it's
Yeah.
just interesting what we tell ourselves in our brain or like what we block ourselves from because of what we think we can't do. But if you can do a handstand, you definitely can do a cartwheel.
Yeah, that's why it's kind of funny. It's ironic, but it just like hit my head like I'm scared to do a cartwheel, but I can do a handstand, so it's basically the same thing, right?
So when like I loved doing cartwheels as a kid, but I never understood like when you do a cartwheel, obviously like you're putting one hand down at a time, but I have always done them facing forward, but I'm too scared to do the cartwheel where you do like sideways, like you're a pinwheel. So you put like
Oh,
one hand
yeah.
down and then the right hand down after. And that's how Jamie does it. And I think it's like the most funny thing ever because if I tried that, I would just fall on my face and I'm scared. Like, but I've always done it the way I've done it. And so I can do one, but not like the pinwheel one.
Well, that's our challenge for this year. We will do a pinwheel cartwheel by the end of the year.
I just can't like picturing myself do that. I can't. But
Yeah.
like you, I mean, I've done cartwheels, I've done handstands, but it's just bucket list. Just adding it
Yeah.
to it.
Yep. Adding to the list.
All right, and then so now you're obviously a yogi, you're a fitness enthusiast, you're someone who loves to work out and take care of your body. What probably would be your advice for someone who's going through a hard time in their own mental or their physical health right now, like you once were?
I would say start small. Start with things that you like and just try everything. I never went on a one of those cycle bikes. Like I've never done a cycle bike. I've never done a bar class. I've never done CrossFit. And throughout this journey, like I've tried a little bit of everything. And I like CrossFit. I'm just scared of it, but I like it. I really love bar classes. I've been doing a bar blend class and it's amazing. And I really like cycling. And I probably would have never done that if I didn't just try something different. So just start
Oh,
small and
definitely.
try everything because people, at least myself, like I didn't know what I was missing because I was afraid to try it. And now that I've
Hmm.
tried it, I've opened up my world to so many more exercises that I can do that are like high intensity but low impact and just things that make me happy. So I don't feel like I'm working out, I feel like I'm having fun.
Totally. I love that advice. And one of my previous coaches once told me to always be a white belt, right? You want to always just be able to try different things. You don't have to be the best at it. Like, I think that's where people go wrong. It's like, okay, if I'm going to start running or if I'm going to start Orange Theory or CrossFit or yoga, I have to be the best of the best. Like, if you're someone who's having a hard time right now, it's not going to be any easier when you set yourself up for that expectation to be the very best when you just have to get started. So it's like try different things and also find what makes you happy. Like if you're doing some stuff at the gym and you think that it's the most boring thing in the world, do you think that you're going to stick to it? Like, no, you're just going to hate yourself and hate what you're doing, and you're not going to get good results because you're doing something that you don't even like. So it's like align what you're doing and try different things to find out what you actually enjoy and what you can stick to and what makes you happy. Because, yeah, exercise does make you feel good. It's funny when you were like talking about trying the different exercises and how it opened you up into a whole new world of things. Like, one of the things that came to mind is like in our society and like within people in general, like, why is it easy for people to, well, I'm not going to generalize, but like in general, like I'm not going to generalize, but in general, but like, I mean, teenagers or young adults and earlier in their years, like, it's easy for people to try maybe a drug or a substance and have that be a gateway into all the different things because it makes them feel good, right? But we know that drugs and substances like that are negative toxins for our body. They alter our brains and our well being, and they can be highly addictive, but so can exercise and so can food. Like you can open up your food world or your exercise world into a whole different other things. And it might be a little bit harder because, yeah, you have to push your body, or, yeah, you have to go drive to a gym, or you have to drive to a facility, or you have to be uncomfortable. But at the same time, it's rewards are going to pay off, and it's a much more positive influence and impact on your body and your mind than drugs might be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, wow, I know 18 years old. That was a different life for you. This is a question I always ask ladies at the very end of our podcast episodes. So, when you were 18 and think about that woman that you were becoming and who you were, if you were to meet her again, what would you tell her?
I would tell her to love herself and do what makes her happy. Um, because I grew up being a people pleaser, and it took me a lot longer to figure out like what I really needed for myself to be happy. So just love yourself and do what makes you happy, and eventually you're gonna get the tribe and the people that you want in your life there, but you have to love yourself first.
Totally. That's amazing. I love it. This was great. I had so much fun chatting with you, Melanie. Hopefully this was something that you had a good time doing too. This is your first podcast, right?
Yes, it was
Cool.
crazy. We talked about a lot, but it
Yeah,
was
we did.
really cool to reflect about where I was and where I've been and where I am. And I'm just really thankful. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for being here. I'm excited to maybe do a follow up in the future and see where we're at, 6 or 9 months from now. And I really enjoyed this. So thanks again.
Thanks, Cheryl.